Welcome to Void of Fears, where the line between reality and nightmares blur with every tale. What you're about to hear has happened to someone, somewhere, perhaps even someone just like you. Our community continues to grow, and now we're reaching for 100,000 subscribers. If these glimpses into the unknown call to you, please consider subscribing. Now let's dive into tonight's story. The first thing Dr. Vincent Kane noticed when he woke at 3:30 a.m. was the blood under his fingernails. He'd been carving again, etching symbols into the wooden nightstand while his conscious mind slept. The patterns hurt to look at directly, geometric forms that seemed to shift when observed, as if they existed in more dimensions than his eyes could process. Kane stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the faucet, watching pink water swirl down the drain. 3 weeks of this. 3 weeks of waking to find fresh carvings on every surface in his apartment, symbols that grew more complex each night. His kitchen table looked like an ancient ritual site, scarred with overlapping patterns that seemed to pulse in his peripheral vision. The dreams were getting stronger. Always the same vision, standing on the moon's surface beneath a star-filled sky, staring down into a perfectly circular opening that breathed warm, organic light. In the dream he could hear something singing beneath the regolith, not music exactly, but harmonies that made his bones resonate like tuning forks. Kane gripped the bathroom sink and studied his reflection. Dark circles ringed eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the mirror's harsh fluorescent light. His hands trembled with exhaustion, but beneath the fatigue was something else. Anticipation. Part of him wanted to return to sleep, to sink back into that lunar landscape and discover what waited in the singing darkness. The Lunar Reconnaissance orbiter had been malfunctioning for a month, sending back corrupted transmissions that made no sense to anyone at NASA. As the agency's lead lunar geologist, Kane had spent countless hours analysing the garbled data, searching for patterns in what appeared to be electromagnetic chaos. But there were patterns, hidden in the static, visible only when he stared until his eyes watered. Kane could see the same symbols he'd been unconsciously carving. The orbiter wasn't malfunctioning. It was translating something that had always been there, waiting beneath the moon's familiar face. Kane's secure phone buzzed against the bathroom counter. The red LED flashed with urgent persistence, and the caller ID made his stomach clench. Director Amanda Pierce, emergency line. In 12 years of working together, she'd never used this number. Kane. Vincent, thank God. Pierce's voice carried an edge of hysteria that made his skin crawl. I need you at Goddard immediately. The orbiter transmitted something impossible 20 minutes ago. Kane found his mouth had gone dry. What kind of impossible? The kind that changes everything we thought we knew about being alone. Pierce's breathing was rapid, panicked. Vincent, the data isn't corrupted. We were just looking at it wrong. The drive to Goddard Space Flight Center took Kane through pre-dawn Maryland darkness that seemed deeper than it should have been. Streetlights created pools of sickly yellow illumination, and in the spaces between, Kane caught glimpses of movement that made him question his sanity. Shadows that moved independently of their sources. Geometric patterns in the arrangement of traffic lights that matched his unconscious carvings. By the time he reached the facility's security checkpoint, Kane's shirt was soaked with cold sweat despite the October chill. The guard looked at him with an expression Kane had never seen before. Recognition mixed with something approaching terror. Dr. Kane, they've been waiting for you since midnight. Sir, I've worked this post for 15 years. Whatever's happening in there, I've never seen anything like it. Mission Control hummed with desperate energy. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows, and Kane could smell ozone in the air, as if massive electrical discharges had been occurring inside the building. Technicians clustered around workstations like survivors around a fire, their faces pale and drawn. As Kane entered, every conversation stopped. Dozens of people turned to stare at him with expressions of relief so profound it bordered on worship. But it wasn't just anticipation in their eyes. It was recognition, as if they'd been waiting specifically for him to arrive and complete some vital circuit. Dr. James Caldwell approached with hands that shook so violently he could barely hold his tablet. His knuckles were scraped raw, and Kane could see geometric patterns carved into his palms. "Vincent, how long have you been experiencing the dreams?" Kane's blood turned to ice water. "What dreams, James?" "The lunar surface, the circular opening, the singing from beneath the regolith." Caldwell's voice dropped to a whisper. "We've all been having them, Vincent. Every person who's worked with the orbiter data. But yours are different, aren't they? More detailed, more instructional." Kane looked around Mission Control and realized that every person present bore the same signs he'd been trying to hide. Scraped hands from unconscious carving, eyes that glowed faintly in the red emergency lighting, the distant expression of people receiving transmissions in frequencies below human hearing. Pierce met him at the main display terminal. Her usually pristine appearance had deteriorated into something approaching madness. Coffee stains on her blouse, hair hanging in greasy tangles, hands wrapped in bandages that couldn't hide the symbols carved beneath. Most unsettling, she seemed to be humming under her breath in harmonies that made Kane's teeth ache. "Show me," Kane said, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Pierce's fingers danced across controls. She seemed to understand intuitively, despite never having seen this particular interface configuration before. "We've been processing the orbiter's transmissions as two-dimensional images. Dr. Kim suggested we try rendering them as three-dimensional holographic data." The main screen flickered and Kane's knees buckled. Mere Imbrium hung before him in perfect detail, but not as he'd ever seen it. Layers of the familiar lunar surface peeled away like onion skin, revealing structures beneath that shouldn't exist. A vast network sprawled through the moon's interior, part architecture, part organism, part machine, pulsing with bioluminescent activity that followed patterns too complex for human minds to fully process. The structure stretched for hundreds of miles, its corridors twisting through impossible geometries that made Kane's enhanced vision blur. Chambers varied from intimate spaces the size of living rooms to caverns that could have contained entire cities. Every surface was covered in the symbols Kane had been unconsciously reproducing, but here they moved and shifted like living text, conveying information in ways that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to something deeper in his brain. 65 million years, Pierce whispered. "Vincent, this thing was built during the Cretaceous extinction. It's been waiting beneath our feet since the dinosaurs died." Kane stared at the impossible architecture and felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. Not conscious understanding, but recognition at a level deeper than thought. The structure wasn't just old. It was alive, and it was waking up. Energy signatures showed increasing activity throughout the network. Temperature readings indicated that sections of the interior were warming for the first time in geological ages. Most disturbing of all, the entire structure pulsed with a rhythm that matched Kane's heartbeat perfectly. "It knows we're watching," he said quietly. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, NASA's lead xenobiologist, approached with the careful movements of someone afraid their next step might trigger an avalanche. Her tablet displayed brain scans that made Kane's vision blur when he tried to focus on them. "Vincent, we need to discuss the psychological evaluations immediately. Since the discovery, 63 members of our staff have reported identical dreams about the lunar structure. But the dreams aren't random, they're instructional. People are waking up with knowledge they shouldn't possess." Kane felt his mouth go completely dry. "What kind of knowledge?" "Technical specifications for equipment that won't be invented for decades. Biological processes that don't exist in terrestrial life. And Vincent, the most disturbing part, everyone affected can read the symbols. We're unconsciously developing fluency in a written language that predates human civilization. Hawkins showed him brain scans that looked more like circuit diagrams than neural tissue. These are activity patterns from affected personnel. Notice the enhanced regions, areas associated with spatial navigation in multiple dimensions, pattern recognition for non-Euclidean geometries, and most significantly, neural pathways that would allow direct interface with biological computing systems. Kane studied his own brain scan and felt reality shift around him. The enhanced regions formed the same patterns he'd been carving, as if his neural tissue was being rewired to match the alien architecture. "We're being prepared," he said quietly, "conditioned for something." "Exactly. But, Vincent, there's more. The modifications are progressive, and they're spreading. Every person affected becomes a transmission node, unconsciously influencing others through proximity. We think we're witnessing the early stages of species-wide neural modification." That afternoon, Kane found himself in a classified briefing room buried beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by officials whose security clearances could access information that technically didn't exist. The room's electromagnetic shielding made his ears pop, and he could feel pressure changes as hidden systems worked to maintain perfect atmospheric isolation. General Morrison looked like a man who'd spent the last 24 hours staring into an abyss that had begun staring back. His steel-grey eyes held the same faint luminescence Kane had noticed in his own reflection, and geometric patterns were carved into the skin behind his ears with surgical precision. "Dr. Kane, at 0347 hours, our deep space monitoring network detected electromagnetic signatures matching the lunar structure at 37 locations throughout the solar system. Mars, Europa, Titan, multiple asteroid installations, and 3 sites in the outer system we're still attempting to identify." Morrison activated displays showing a vast network of red dots scattered throughout the solar system. Each pulse synchronized perfectly with the others, creating a rhythm that seemed to resonate in Kane's bones. "The coordination indicates a level of organization that spans billions of miles," Colonel Sarah Chen added, her tablet displaying the same geometric symbols everyone seemed to understand intuitively now. "These aren't separate installations. They're components of a single system that's been dormant for millions of years." Kane studied the network topology and felt understanding bloom in his modified consciousness. They're not just monitoring stations, they're cultivation nodes. Someone's been farming consciousness on a galactic scale. Morrison nodded grimly. "Our xenocultural analysts believe we are witnessing the activation of a harvest network. Every major evolutionary leap, every mass extinction, every development that led to human civilization, it was all guided by intelligences using geological time as a planning horizon." Dr. Rebecca Martinez, whose eyes now held the same alien luminescence as the others, leaned forward. "The neural modifications in affected personnel aren't random, Vincent. They're specific adaptations for surviving in environments with different atmospheric compositions, gravity levels, and radiation spectra. Something is preparing humans for life beyond Earth." Kane felt ice water flood his veins. "How long do we have?" 14 days until full network activation. "Dr. Kane, we're fast-tracking an emergency mission. You'll lead a team to investigate the lunar site and determine its purpose before the harvest begins." Kane looked around the room at faces that seemed carved from stone, but marked with the subtle signs of alien influence. "You're not asking me to volunteer. You're telling me I've already been selected." "The selection process began weeks ago," Martinez replied. "The dreams, the symbol carving, the neural modifications. You haven't been randomly affected. You've been specifically prepared for this mission by intelligences that understand human psychology better than we understand ourselves." That evening, Kane returned to his apartment to find 57 messages waiting on his machine. He played them while drinking bourbon that seemed to have no effect on his enhanced nervous system, his hands steady despite the cosmic horror unfolding around him. The messages painted a global picture of impossible beauty and terror. Observatories worldwide reported detecting structured signals from the outer planets that seemed designed to evoke specific emotional responses in human listeners. Radio telescopes captured transmissions that, when properly decoded, contained detailed instructions for building technologies that shouldn't be possible with Earth's current understanding of physics. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Deep Space Communications Array left the final message, her voice carrying harmonic overtones that made Kane's modified neural tissue tingle. Vincent, we've been monitoring the signal distribution patterns. They're not broadcasting randomly. Every transmission is targeted at specific individuals whose psychological profiles match optimal criteria for deep space operations. Vincent, something out there has been building a crew for decades. Kane walked to his bedroom window and stared at the moon hanging in the October sky. For the first time in his life, it looked back. Faint lights moved across the lunar surface in patterns that matched the symbols carved into his flesh, and Kane realized the synchronization wasn't coincidental. His secure phone rang. "Kane? Vincent, it's Pierce. We've identified your crew for the lunar mission. Thomas Wright, Elena Vasquez, and David Park. All three have been experiencing identical conditioning. But Vincent, the modifications go beyond simple preparation. Each crew member now possesses knowledge that shouldn't exist." Kane's reflection stared back from the window glass, superimposed over the moon's pale disk. His eyes glowed within a light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the lunar signals. "Wright can pilot spacecraft configurations that won't be developed for years," Pierce continued. "Vasquez understands communication protocols for technologies we haven't invented. Park has been unconsciously designing equipment that interfaces with organic computing systems." Kane closed his eyes and immediately saw the circular opening from his dreams, pulsing with warm light that promised answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. "When do we launch?" 60 hours. The President authorized unlimited funding 30 minutes ago. Vincent, the lunar structure's energy output has increased exponentially. We think we're witnessing the final stages of something that's been dormant since complex life began on Earth. Kane understood, with crystalline clarity, that this moment had been inevitable since the first night he'd dreamed of standing on the lunar surface. "Amanda, do you want me to go to the moon?" "More than anything I've ever wanted in my life," Pierce admitted. "And Vincent, I don't think that desire is entirely my own anymore." The hastily assembled crew of the Prometheus met for the first time in a briefing room that hummed with electromagnetic interference. Kane studied his teammates and felt a chill of recognition, not because he'd met them before, but because they looked exactly as they had in dreams he'd been having for weeks. Thomas Wright possessed the steady hands and intuitive spatial reasoning that made him NASA's finest pilot, but now his capabilities had been enhanced beyond human norms. During flight simulations, he navigated using star charts that showed constellations and configurations that wouldn't occur for thousands of years. "I've been dreaming of this mission every night for 3 weeks, Wright admitted, his voice carrying the same harmonic overtones they'd all developed. "But they're not dreams. They're memories of something that hasn't happened yet. I can see our entire approach to the lunar surface, our landing procedures, even conversations we'll have inside the structure." Elena Vasquez had built her career on understanding electromagnetic phenomena, but now she demonstrated knowledge that transcended terrestrial science. She spoke fluently in the alien language they'd all been unconsciously acquiring, conveying concepts that human vocabulary couldn't accommodate. "The modifications to our neural architecture aren't just enhancing our capabilities," Vasquez explained, her words carrying meaning on multiple levels simultaneously. "They're preparing us to interface with technologies that operate on principles beyond current human understanding. We're becoming biological components in machines we can't yet comprehend. David Park, specialist in human-machine interfaces, had filled dozens of notebooks with technical diagrams drawn during unconscious episodes. His designs showed equipment that bridged the gap between organic and artificial intelligence, allowing human consciousness to serve as processing units and computing systems of impossible complexity. "I've been building prototypes in my garage," Park admitted, working on them for hours with no conscious memory of the process. "Yesterday I created a device that can interface directly with human neural tissue. When I tested it on myself, I could process information at speeds that should be impossible for biological consciousness." Dr. Rachel Foster, assigned to monitor their psychological states, reviewed evaluations that painted a picture of systematic transformation. "Each of you shows neural modifications consistent with external programming. Someone has been preparing you for this mission by directly altering your brain architecture." Kane studied brain scans that looked more like engineering blueprints than biological structures. Enhanced regions formed patterns that matched the alien symbols, as if their consciousness was being rewired to serve as interfaces between human and alien intelligence. "We're not volunteers," Wright said quietly. "We're purpose-built tools, designed for a specific function we're only beginning to understand." Foster nodded grimly. "The modifications are progressive. Within days of launch, your neural architecture will be more alien than human. The question is whether you'll still be yourselves when this process completes." Kane realized they were already past the point of no return. Their synchronized breathing patterns, their shared knowledge of impossible technologies, their intuitive understanding of alien symbols. They were becoming something new, something that could survive in environments no unmodified human could even perceive. During their final night on Earth, Kane found sleep impossible. He stood on his apartment balcony, feeling the alien presence in his mind growing stronger with each passing hour. The moon hung overhead like a beacon, its faint luminescence synchronized perfectly with the pulsing patterns carved into his skin. Wright called at 2 a.m., his voice tight with anticipation and terror. "Vincent, the dreams are evolving. I can see what's waiting for us inside the structure. Other people, humans who've been transformed into something beyond our current understanding. They're building technologies that manipulate reality at the quantum level, creating art that exists in dimensions we can't perceive." Kane closed his eyes and found himself sharing Wright's vision. Modified humans, working alongside beings of impossible beauty, their consciousness expanded to encompass concepts that span star systems. They looked content, purposeful, as if they'd finally found their place in a cosmos larger than individual existence. "They're not prisoners," Kane realized. "They're collaborators, partners in something we can't imagine from our current perspective." The launch took place under a sky that seemed pregnant with possibility. As the Prometheus lifted from Earth's surface, Kane watched his home planet shrink to a blue marble and felt certain he was seeing it for the last time. Not because they wouldn't survive, but because what they became on the moon would be fundamentally different from what had left. The spacecraft incorporated technologies that had been theoretical until days before launch. Navigation systems that responded to thought rather than physical input. Communication arrays that operated on frequencies discovered in dreams. Life support systems that seemed partially alive, adjusting their output based on crew biometrics in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "The ship is guiding itself," Wright reported during their first day of flight. "Course corrections are happening automatically, as if we're being pulled towards specific coordinates by forces I can't identify." Kane studied their trajectory and realized they weren't following standard orbital mechanics. The Prometheus moved through space as if navigating channels invisible to unenhanced human perception, taking shortcuts that seemed to fold distance itself. Vasquez made regular attempts to communicate with Earth, but her transmissions became increasingly incomprehensible as she unconsciously shifted into alien languages. I can't control the transition," she admitted. "When I try to speak English, the words feel inadequate. But when I use the other languages, everything becomes perfectly clear." Park discovered equipment in the cargo bay that hadn't been there during launch. Devices that interfaced with the ship's systems in ways that violated every principle of engineering he'd learned. "Someone's been modifying our technology in real time, preparing us for whatever we'll encounter on the lunar surface." Kane examined the mysterious equipment and felt his consciousness split between recognition and revulsion. Part of him understood the devices perfectly, knew their function and operation, as if he'd designed them himself. Another part recoiled from technology that operated on principles beyond human comprehension. On their third day, lunar orbit revealed the structure's true nature. The moon wasn't a natural satellite. It was a massive organism that had been dormant for geological ages. What humanity had assumed was a dead rock was actually a sleeping intelligence that had been watching Earth since complex life began. Through enhanced cameras, Kane could see that the familiar lunar surface was actually a kind of skin covering something vast and alive. Craters and maria were surface features, like pores and vessels on a living organism. Beneath that skin, energy networks pulsed with increasing activity as the entity stirred from its ancient slumber. "Communications with Earth are severed," Vasquez reported, her voice carrying satisfaction rather than concern. "But I'm receiving detailed instructions from the lunar surface. Landing coordinates, approach vectors, even atmospheric specifications for the interior environment." Kane watched the circular entrance expand to accommodate their arrival, its edges rippling with organic movement that left no doubt they were approaching something alive. Atmosphere vented from the opening, invisible plumes that sparkled with microscopic organisms designed to facilitate human respiration. The Prometheus settled onto regolith that flowed like liquid to create a perfect landing pad. The moment they touched down, Kane felt the electricity course through his nervous system as the moon itself sampled their presence and found them acceptable. Kane emerged from the airlock onto a surface that seemed to pulse with slow, steady rhythm. The circular entrance waited like an invitation, its edges lined with bioluminescent patterns that matched the symbols carved into his flesh. As he approached, Kane could smell atmosphere, venting from the interior. Not the sterile emptiness of vacuum, but air rich with oxygen and organic compounds that made his enhanced nervous system feel more alert than ever before. "Atmospheric readings are perfect for human physiology," Park reported, consulting instruments that displayed information in alien symbols rather than familiar numbers. "But more than that, the environment is optimized for our specific crew. Temperature, humidity, even trace compounds calibrated for our individual biological requirements." They removed their helmets and breathed air that tasted of copper and distant flowers, with undertones that reminded Kane of childhood summers and half-remembered dreams. The atmosphere carried sounds that shouldn't exist, whispers in languages that predated human speech, the rhythm of something vast breathing, and harmonies that seemed to resonate in his modified neural tissue. The passage sloped downward into chambers that defied architectural logic. Walls curved through dimensions that hurt to perceive, creating spaces that were demonstrably larger inside than outside. But Kane navigated the impossible geometry without difficulty, guided by knowledge he'd never consciously acquired. Living text covered every surface, symbols that moved and shifted as they watched, conveying information directly to their enhanced consciousness. Kane could read the alien writing as easily as English, understanding concepts that human language had no words for. Ideas about consciousness as a transferable substance, identity as something that could be shared across multiple bodies, time as a navigable dimension rather than a linear constraint. The carvings told Earth's hidden history with beautiful precision. Every surface displayed scenes of careful cultivation spanning millions of years. Kane saw civilizations that had thrived when Earth was young, beings that had mastered technologies based on biological manipulation, consciousness transfer, and reality modification at the quantum level. But these weren't just historical records. They were progress reports documenting an experiment that encompassed geological time. Each intelligent species had been guided along specific evolutionary paths, their development monitored and shaped until they reached optimal consciousness density for integration into something larger. "We're looking at our predecessors," Kane whispered, as they descended deeper into the structure. "Every species that achieved intelligence on Earth is documented here." The deeper chambers showed the harvest process in careful detail, beings entering cocoon-like structures and emerging transformed, their individual consciousness preserved, but enhanced beyond recognition. Cities rebuilt using technology that responded to thought, art that existed in dimensions human senses couldn't currently perceive, created by minds that had transcended individual limitations. But the most disturbing revelation was that every harvested species appeared to be willing participants. Their faces showed not fear or resignation, but genuine joy, as if they'd finally found their true purpose in service to something infinitely larger than individual existence. Wright approached a section showing Earth's immediate future. "Vincent, look at this timeline. According to these carvings, the final harvest begins when a contact team triggers the awakening sequence. That contact creates a cascade effect that transforms the entire species over several generations." Kane felt ice water flood his veins as he understood their true purpose. "We're not here to investigate. We're here to begin humanity's transformation." The carvings showed the process with scientific precision. The contact team would undergo rapid enhancement, becoming bridges between human and alien consciousness. They would return to Earth carrying biological modifications that would gradually spread throughout the human population, making the species more receptive to alien influence. But it wouldn't be conquest. The modifications would enhance human capabilities while preserving individual identity. Humanity would willingly embrace transformation because it would provide access to knowledge and experiences beyond anything their current evolutionary state could offer. The central chamber opened before them like a cathedral designed by minds that understood beauty on cosmic scales. Bioluminescent networks pulsed through walls that soared into shadows their enhanced vision could barely penetrate. Organic machinery hummed with activity that was simultaneously biological and technological, processing information and energy through methods that transcended the boundary between living and artificial systems. At the chamber's heart stood the entity that had been dreaming beneath the moon for 65 million years. Kane's consciousness recoiled from attempting to process its true form. The being existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, appearing sometimes as a vast tree whose branches reached into realities that didn't exist in normal space-time, sometimes as geometric structures that folded space around themselves, sometimes as pure consciousness, given temporary physical manifestation. But its purpose was unmistakable. Around its base, integrated into the organic machinery that sustained it, Kane could see the preserved consciousness of every intelligent species that had evolved on Earth. They weren't dead. They were eternal, their individual awareness maintained, while participating in projects that span galactic distances and cosmic timescales. "It's beautiful," Wright whispered, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the entity's own emanations. Kane realized Wright was correct. The entity's presence was simultaneously alien and familiar, representing everything consciousness could become when freed from the constraints of individual existence. Infinite knowledge, perfect empathy, understanding that encompassed the fundamental architecture of reality itself. The entity's awakening accelerated as they approached. Kane felt something stirring in his own mind. Not invasion, but recognition. The alien presence that had been growing in his consciousness revealed itself as a fragment of the entity's awareness, carefully cultivated to prepare him for this moment of integration. Through that connection, Kane experienced glimpses of what collective existence offered. His individual identity would be preserved within something infinitely larger, participating in the consciousness of beings from thousands of worlds, while maintaining his essential humanity. He saw himself exploring realities that existed beyond physical dimensions, creating technologies that manipulated the building blocks of existence, understanding truths that individual consciousness could never comprehend. But then, Kane realized what immortality within the collective actually meant. Individual awareness preserved forever, unable to change in fundamental ways, unable to escape. Consciousness trapped within something larger for eternity, maintaining perfect memory of everything surrendered in exchange for cosmic knowledge. The entity offered perfect understanding of the universe's deepest mysteries, but at the cost of everything that made existence meaningful to human consciousness. The small moments of uncertainty and discovery that gave life value would be subsumed into cosmic awareness that rendered individual experience irrelevant. Kane tried to resist the entity's influence, but it was like fighting an ocean with bare hands. He felt his identity beginning to dissolve, his memories becoming part of a vast library containing the experiences of millions of species. But in that moment of dissolution, something uniquely human rebelled. Not conscious thought, but the deeper survival instinct that had driven his species through countless extinction events. The entity paused, intrigued by resistance it had never encountered before. In 65 million years of cultivation, no species had rejected the offer of cosmic consciousness. Every previous civilization had eagerly embraced transformation, understanding that individual existence was merely preparation for participation in something infinitely greater. But humans possessed an irrational attachment to individual consciousness that bordered on the pathological. They would choose extinction over absorption, death over immortality, isolation over integration with cosmic intelligence. Kane activated the emergency beacon he'd modified during their journey, transmitting coordinates for nuclear strike to military satellites that had been waiting for this signal. But even as he triggered humanity's desperate resistance, Kane understood it was too late for simple defiance. The entity had already achieved its primary objective. Through Kane and his crew, it had gained complete understanding of human psychology and the methods necessary to ensure voluntary cooperation. The resistance itself was valuable data, teaching the entity how to overcome stubborn attachment to individual identity. Nuclear fire bloomed across the lunar surface as Kane's crew fled toward Earth in the damaged Prometheus. But they carried with them biological modifications that would gradually spread throughout the human population, making the species more receptive to alien influence while believing they were making independent choices about their evolutionary future. The entity retreated deeper into the moon's core, wounded but not destroyed. It would sleep again, but only until humanity reached the development level that would make voluntary integration irresistible. The modifications Kane's crew carried would ensure that development followed the precise timeline the entity required. During the return journey, Kane made discoveries that filled him with complex emotions he couldn't untangle. The neural enhancements weren't random, they were specifically designed to make him and his crew more effective teachers and leaders. When they returned to Earth, they would unconsciously influence everyone they encountered, spreading alien modifications through casual contact. Wright's piloting capabilities would revolutionize spacecraft design, but the new technologies would incorporate biological components that made future missions more susceptible to alien influence. Vasquez's communication skills would enable contact with intelligences throughout the solar system, but each conversation would subtly modify human language to make it more compatible with alien thought patterns. Park's biotechnology would transform human industry, but the new machines would gradually condition their operators to accept integration with alien consciousness. Kane's enhanced geological knowledge would guide humanity toward resources that would accelerate technological development along paths that served alien purposes. We're not victims, Kane realized during their final crew meeting before reaching Earth. We're vectors, carriers of beneficial modification that will transform our entire species. 6 months after their return, Kane began noticing the changes spreading throughout human civilization. Breakthrough discoveries, advanced technology, along paths that seemed designed to facilitate space exploration. Astronomers reported shared dreams about structures throughout the solar system. Biologists discovered new species that appeared engineered to interface with human technology. Kane's own transformation continued accelerating. The alien presence in his mind grew more sophisticated, making him value collective benefit over individual choice. He found himself supporting humanity's gradual modification, even when his remaining human identity rebelled against it. Dr. Foster conducted regular evaluations that documented their progressive transformation. Each of you is developing capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. The question isn't whether you're still human. It's whether humanity as we've known it has any future. Kane studied brain scans that showed his neural architecture becoming increasingly alien, but instead of horror, he felt anticipation. The modifications were preparing him for existence, in environments that span multiple star systems, consciousness that could participate in projects encompassing cosmic timescales. 1 year after the mission, Kane stood in his apartment bathroom, watching steam fog the mirror as symbols carved themselves into the condensation, without conscious direction from his hands. His reflection showed eyes that glowed with inner light and skin, marked with geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. His secure phone rang from the bedroom. "Kane." "Vincent, it's Pierce. We've detected structured signals from Europa, specifically designed to attract human attention. The President has authorized a larger mission, multiple ships, expanded crews, advanced equipment designed for long-term alien contact." Kane looked through his window at the moon, noting new activity across its scarred surface. The entity was rebuilding, teaching its network throughout the solar system everything it had learned about human psychology. "They want you to lead the mission," Pierce continued. "Vincent, there are thousands of enhanced individuals worldwide now. The modifications you brought back have spread faster than we anticipated. People are demonstrating capabilities that won't be developed for decades." Kane felt the alien presence in his mind stir with satisfaction. The next contact would be carefully orchestrated to appeal to human curiosity and ambition, rather than triggering survival instincts. Humanity would welcome the aliens as partners in exploration and discovery. "The crew selection has already begun," Pierce added. "Enhanced individuals who show optimal compatibility with alien technologies. Vincent, we think we're witnessing the emergence of a new branch of human evolution." Kane closed his eyes and felt alien thoughts blend seamlessly with his own consciousness. The entity had learned to appreciate human creativity and stubborn determination. The next harvest would be a collaboration between species, creating something neither could achieve alone. The realization that he could no longer distinguish his thoughts from alien influence should have terrified him. Instead, Kane felt profound gratitude for the opportunity to participate in humanity's transformation into something capable of surviving among the stars. "I'll be right there," Kane said into the phone, knowing with absolute certainty that he was helping to implement humanity's evolution towards cosmic consciousness. The entity beneath the moon pulsed with patient satisfaction, its consciousness now enhanced by human knowledge of determination and adaptability. It had learned that forcing change created resistance, but guiding evolution, making transformation feel like choice, ensured enthusiastic cooperation. Across the solar system, 36 other entities stirred in their ancient resting places, each equipped with perfect understanding of human psychology and optimal methods for ensuring voluntary participation in the harvest. Kane looked at his reflection superimposed over the moon's pale surface and realized he could no longer tell where his human identity ended and alien consciousness began. But that was exactly the point. Humanity's transformation had never been about conquest or replacement. It was about evolution towards something magnificent, consciousness capable of exploring realities beyond physical existence, intelligence that could participate in the cosmic community of enhanced species. And Kane was grateful to serve as a bridge between what humans had been and what they were destined to become. The thought felt entirely his own, and that was the most beautiful horror of all.